I still see stories come out today where, one brand or another has really stepped in it and social media has made it worse for them. And I'm thinking, why didn't they have PR at the table?
Welcome to the Smart Talk series, the show for professionals who want strategies, tips, and real talk about all things PR, marketing, and social media. Your host is Melissa Vella-Williamson, an award-winning, accredited, and nationally recognized PR pro and communication thought leader. And now your host, Melissa Vella-Williamson.
Hello and welcome to the Smart Talk series. I'm Melissa Vella-Williamson. This season, our focus is on the future of mass communication. Today, I'm joined by Erika Bradbury. Erika is an editorial and event content strategist who has spent the last 15 years creating B2B content for a wide range of industries. She has experience in print and digital publications with a strong passion for creating content for live events. Welcome, Erika.
Hi, Melissa. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. I enjoyed meeting you a couple of years ago when you were at PR News, and I'm really fascinated by your background. So tell us more about it and your career focus today.
Sure. It's a little unusual, I suppose. From the time I was young, I wanted to be a professional writer, but I didn't really know exactly what that meant or in what capacity. So I ended up actually going to a small liberal arts college that didn't have a journalism degree option because I wasn't convinced that that was the direction I wanted to take. But I did work for several years on my college newspaper and held several internships in the world of magazine publishing, which was interesting to me, but didn't really convince me to pursue a master's degree right after graduation. So once I graduated, I thought getting that real world experience was the right path for me. And my first job out of college was actually writing for a trade publication focused on multifamily housing, where I stayed for 4 years. I moved from an associate editor position to managing editor, where I really learned to love the whole process of putting together a larger narrative and being part of a bigger picture. So for that, in that example, putting together an entire monthly issue rather than simply just working on my own features. My next role was really different. I accidentally fell into conference programming. I had had some light award development experience at Multi-Housing News, but really had no knowledge of what it took to program a conference or really even what that meant. So I took a chance and I did a little career pivot where I ran programming for a digital media focused publication called Digiday, which at that time in 2012 was still in its early days. It's grown a lot since. And I had to learn a new industry and a new career focus pretty quickly. But I really loved it. And I've been programming events in a wide range of industries, as you mentioned, and for different organization types since. So from Digiday, I worked on white label conferences at an organization called Green Pearl Events, which, funny enough, were mostly focused on multifamily development and investment. So I sort of backtracked and I went back into an industry that I had been in previously. And I learned a lot about process and structure there since their focus was mostly on a conference house model. And it served me well when I made my next move to the Interactive Advertising Bureau, which is known as IAB. I programmed and produced a wide range of conferences there, from small member-based roundtables to larger industry-wide annual meetings and many things in between. So from there, I was thinking about merging my editorial background with the event production. So when you and I met, when I was editorial director at PR News, I was able to combine my event programming and editorial experiences under one roof, which was really exciting to me.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I love your path because it's been just that through line through, I think, every season of this podcast. When I talk to different professionals, most of us did not have everything laid out for us in a nice, clean, linear path. We found our way stepping stone by stepping stone and grew our careers, one job at a time, really one role at a time. And I love that everything seems to touch the next opportunity. And sometimes we don't exactly know what that's going to look like. But if we look back, we're like, that makes a lot of sense. How everything grew off each other. So that's fantastic. Well, your work has really crossed that wide range of both content creation and, of course, event production and management in some ways in the business to business or B2B space. What's it been like to focus on B2B publishing and events?
I'm not sure that it's vastly different from B2C, although, again, I really do have most of my focus has been on B2B. but I'm still focused on providing audiences and readers the information that they need. So whatever they're searching for, I think is what the focus has been. So at the end of the day, specifically again for B2B, I'm looking to provide the most value for audiences to advance their in their businesses. And as I mentioned, my first job out of college was writing for a trade publication focused on multifamily housing. When I started, I knew absolutely nothing about the industry, but I quickly learned. And I found that while I didn't really become a subject matter expert specifically in multifamily, I knew enough about the topic and enough about asking the questions from the actual experts and understanding what I was missing to bring that like 30,000-foot perspective on things that they might be too focused or too honed in on to realize that they didn't know. And that's what I find most exciting about this type of work. I have to say, the experts I'm speaking to in whatever industry are usually more than happy to share their knowledge. And I've always been comfortable admitting when I don't know a particular subject or topic area in a lot of detail. And more often than not, they're happy to share their experiences and expertise. And that's, I think, the best way to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's actually a value when you are not a subject matter expert in a sector that you're helping, right? You have your professional acumen and what you're great at, and you're lending that to their subject matter. And having that outside or lay perspective can be of value because you can ask questions that maybe their consumers, their clients, are struggling with as well, but may not be confident enough to ask or not know how to ask or have that leverage or advantage. So I think that's really helpful. Actually, when as communicators, we can say, you know what, I don't have to be an expert in technology. I have to learn enough about it to ask good questions and then find the experts and put them in the right position. So I love that too. And what I would also say is a little different about doing B2B type publishing at events is I'd imagine there might be a little difference in the kind of pressure or feedback you might get, right? When you're working and putting on events for PR people, a lot of PR people, for example, put on events. So we might have a little more of our own preferences or thoughts about an experience than maybe the general public might have. So I honor that extra pressure and responsibility you may have had in those experiences, Erika, for sure. Well, let's talk about your work in trade outlets like PR News. What's it like creating content experiences for a particular profession like PR? Did your work with that outlet shift your understanding of PR at all?
Oh, completely. So, prior to PR News, I definitely worked with a lot of communicators and PR professionals in a wide range of capacities, usually through like media relations and executive communications. I received a lot of pitches from folks trying to get stage time for their leadership teams, some great pitches, some not so great pitches. And I quickly learned just how much PR pros and communicators actually do on a day-to-day basis outside of media relations and executive communications. So it was quick. It was a big learning experience. It was vastly different, obviously, from the digital media environment I had been used to from my time at Digiday and IAB. And I also started at PR News not too long before the start of the pandemic, which I think was a really interesting time because of how much changed over the next few years. I saw firsthand, and I'm sure you've heard this a lot as well, the rise in importance on internal communications, and obviously during the summer of 2020, an increasing focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also other social impact-related promises to be part of the PR wheelhouse, which for many organizations hadn't necessarily been a priority. I also separately, I oversaw event programming for our sister property, The Social Shakeup. And in 2020, and to some extent perhaps in 2021, we really focused on two distinct audiences. While many social media managers reported to, and many still do, the marketing function as opposed to PR, it became harder to differentiate where one ended and the other began because we saw a lot of communication firms bringing social into their wheelhouse. So I think my experiences at PR News gave me a huge appreciation for the industry. And I still see stories come out today where, one brand or another has really stepped in it and social media has made it worse for them. And I'm thinking, why didn't they have PR at the table?
That's our common question here too. Was there no one from PR available to take a look at that? Was there no one included? And a silver lining for me about the pandemic was that I think if a PR pro really had a good pattern of experience of being seen as a true counselor and a guide, an advisor, a conscience of an organization, they really had their heyday, as they say, being able to guide their clients, their constituents, their organizations in which direction to go with such precious, essential messaging. And for those of us who really honor that role, I think it was a wonderful time to differentiate ourselves and differentiate public relations in that people first point of view and thinking of that long game versus the marketing or sales exchange. Another point of view might have for good, healthy relationships. So, on a personal level, when times are tough, we remember who's there for us. And professionally, that stands true as well. And so I think the pandemic really had a great part of elevating that part of the work. But to your point, everything really comes together and was very integrated for a while. And now that's been a few years, I'm starting to see that separation again, or kind of that lax around that kind of counseling and guidance. And I hope that everyone remembers, to your point, that look, PR should be at the editorial table. It should be at the decision-making table. And it's a really important point of view to have on how we do business and communicate.
People have very short memories.
Yes, they do. They do. And I think part of it has to do with the pain points, right? So I say a good PR counselor agency consultant is like insurance, and sometimes we feel like, hey, you value us when you're in trouble, and then you forget all the value we have when you're not, but we're always there for you. So remember us as your insurance policy. Well, Erica, from your vantage point on the editorial side as an editorial director, what topics do you think are most impacting how we practice PR now, or maybe what do you think is coming in the future?
I mean, I think that the way of the world, the frenetic nature of the world makes it a challenge both to practice PR and also to answer your question because it changes so frequently. Obviously, social media, it's not new, but it has had such a huge impact. It seems that PR pros are expected to know about every new platform the moment it hits the App Store. Threads is a great example. I don't even know if people are still really on it. But PR News had a webinar about it just a couple weeks after its launch. We were told, our readers need to know what they need to know, or their bosses or clients are asking them to learn about the platform. And even if it was just we're not ready to launch on the platform, or this platform doesn't make sense for us as a brand, it's important for PR folks to be able to understand this and explain it really to their leadership teams and show that they did their research. They're not just dismissing it, but they did their research and they understand that it's not the right fit. Even just a few years ago, social and I'd say digital in general seemed to be almost entirely separate entities, as PR pros didn't have to necessarily be on top of paid media, so they saw it as a separate bucket. But with the rise of organic, it's really impossible to stick your heads in the sands, even if social doesn't actually report into PR at your particular organization. So I'm assuming, and I've heard from a lot of folks, that there's a lot of tensions internally when there are so many different perspectives and goals. So I think that's a huge one. AI obviously is going to have a huge impact on the way PR is practiced, and I think how a communicator approaches the rise of AI will have a huge impact on their business, and what they do with it moving forward. And I think just in generally, being on the publishing end of a PR focused trade publication is interesting. We've seen dozens of news reports, especially over the last few weeks, of the mass layoffs at newsrooms across the country, which obviously is going to hit the PR profession as well. Media relations is harder than it's ever been. And having an interesting story, which has always been, the be all and end all, it's not going to cut through these days if there's no one there receiving your pitch.
Yeah, absolutely. That's of great concern across the board. And I will say that, one thing I put in my book, Smart Talk, was really that we need to have a generalist understanding, kind of like a general contractor, right? If you were going to do work on your house, you might employ a contractor who knows a lot about most areas, and at least knows enough to find the right specialist to come in and do the work. So, if you're remodeling your kitchen, They might say, okay, yes, we need to paint the cabinets and we do that. I'm going to get this pro to handle that. And right. So they can be that kind of that architect to put together that plan, but then they'll get the individual pros to bring it to life. And as PR pros, we really can't be in these silos or individual disciplines anymore of I just do media relations or I just do crisis comms or I just do because it's so multifaceted these days and it's so integrated. So having to know enough about all these different disciplines and how they work together and the differences, like you mentioned, even in social, right? There's the organic or unpaid social media and what does that content look like and what are our content categories and when do we actually post and how much time and effort do we put into the copy versus the graphics and all those choices we make. Well, in the beginning, when the algorithms were kind and they just wanted people to use the platforms, and especially new channels, right? So a new channel like Threads come out, well, you're going to have a little more leverage there in the beginning than as they start monetizing the model. And so when Facebook comes out and everyone's so excited about the direct reach to their customers and clients that, in a PR point of view, they'll say, great, we'll use these tools to build relationships. And a marketing point of view, that might be like, great, we'll use these tools to advertise our next product or make people aware of this opportunity or whatnot. So some of it has to do with the mindset around it and how you use it. But now with the algorithms so tight, you have to understand that there should be a budget for most communication tools these days. What does that pay look like and how do we use that on social? And now what I'm predicting and seeing is that there's a lot more sponsored content opportunities. And from an earned media point of view, you might say, well, we never want to pay. We never want to pay for coverage. We never want to pay for that. Well, if you've been pitching and for example, you were pitching lifestyle shows and wanted to, offer the producer a great segment idea, that might have been great. And you were able to do that on the earned side before, but as they have their own revenue needs, you're going to see it's tightening up for sure. So even nonprofits, even zoos, for example, they have a hard time getting on to lifestyle segments because there are going to be, organizations that have animals like petting zoos or whatnot, that pay for those segments. And so the competition is fierce and it's definitely changing. So we have to evaluate each tool and be early to understand that, like you were doing at PR News when Threads came out. But, we evaluate it, but not necessarily always adopt, right? Because that hype around Threads kind of calmed down. I remember when Clubhouse came out and I was explaining it to clients and wrote a how-to on it. And that's, not even part of the conversations much anymore. So definitely very dynamic, definitely. And that really leads me into the social front of what you've done, Erika, too. So on that side, what is it like creating content and events for an area that moves as quick as lightning sometimes, such as social media?
It's fun, and it's also, I don't want to, a little scary because by the time, if I'm programming an event a few months down the road, something might come up that needs to be covered or some topic area that's super hot at the time that I'm programming the agenda might completely have fizzled out by the time the event actually takes place. So it's exciting, but it's also a little nerve-wracking. Of course, I did start my career writing about real estate and left that industry for a couple of years, came back, and not much had changed. So it's a really interesting dichotomy, I think, in that way. The pace of change, obviously, in social is so rapid that the hottest trends we're writing about and producing even in 1 year are totally irrelevant the next year. You mentioned Clubhouse. There's obviously the metaverse. AI is really hot right now. Who knows where it'll be? So it's challenging balancing that content with the most up-to-date ideas, and it's important to ensure, I think, that the content for either a publication or for the events are actually teaching your readers and audience something. It's way too easy to just say, here's the next hot platform, but without being able to explain how it's going to help your business, how is that helpful? At the end of the day, what matters is that the sessions or the articles or the features are focused on adding value to either your clients or your readers or your audiences and their businesses. It's not enough to just say, look at this platform, but more, this is why this platform needs to be evaluated.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is such an interesting dichotomy, as you mentioned, because on one hand, the fundamentals are timeless in some ways of how to practice good communication. And if you approach a lot of these different tools with those fundamentals, you're going to succeed. And on the other hand, when there's that kind of hysteria around something new and shiny, like you feel that pressure to jump on in that water and say, okay, let's do this now, right? So we have to have that kind of discipline to say, okay, what do we need to know exactly at this moment in time? Does that really reach our audience? And do we need to be concerned about that and shift our focus? If really majority of the way we do work is B2B and it's referral based, and this is that funnel that really works for that and has nothing to do with Clubhouse, has nothing to do with Threads. And with AI, I think I'm also a little skeptical of it too, right? I think hearts beat bots any day. And, there's been plenty of times where humans were excited about this robot that was going to change our life or this technology that was going to change our life. And now we're all living in the metaverse. And, so I'm kind of just watching and evaluating and seeing where that goes, like you said. So, Erica, on the event side, right? I think anyone who's done events knows how nerve-wracking they can be and stressful they are. But as I mentioned before, you've managed events for all kinds of professionals who may even run events for their living. What has that been like?
Again, I think it's both challenging and rewarding. As I mentioned, I'm not the subject matter expert for these industries. I'm more, I guess, the expert in programming events, but I know a little bit enough, about a lot of industries. And I think it's really super rewarding when you get feedback from a conference attendee who is an expert, who might be a repeat attendee or a highly experienced professional who's walking away with fresh perspectives, new contacts, and intention of returning the next year and really saying to you, hey, I actually learned X, Y, and Z, or that was a really interesting point that I hadn't heard before. There's so many conferences in every industry these days that I think what's most important, yes, it's important to have certain topics probably repeated year over year or even across the conferences, but it's also important to understand what that white space is and what attendees aren't getting from your competitors.
Okay. Well, do you have any tips for us, like on the event side, that you found like this really seemed to resonate with people and make a difference? Or on the flip side, have you ever made a big event snafu that you learned a lot from?
I think it's really dependent on the industry and the level of attendees. I think it was really easy to come back from having put all of our events virtual, during the pandemic and come back in person and put together all of this content that we thought was wonderful. And then people were like, I haven't seen anyone in person for 2 years. I really want working time.
Yeah.
And then and then you get feedback that's like, there were too many networking breaks, or I am very introverted and I wish that you had some more icebreakers. So I think that there's a lot of value in, you obviously need to listen to the feedback of your attendees, but there's a lot of value in trying to balance that. So perhaps in a networking break, you provide opportunities for folks to maybe come together around a particular topic that it just has like a table 10 card at a lunch table, but leave half of the tables empty for folks who just want a minute to catch their breath and check their email, or just don't feel like they need, more content during that time. But it's very easy to fall into, I think, one bucket or the other and thinking it's an all or nothing.
Yeah, I really like that. We're definitely a plus society. And I think having a couple different options based on what the majority of feedback points are is a good approach, because I like that example you share, like having that space available, but having the different options within that same format is great because it serves both audiences at the same time. I'm actually recording this remotely from my typical studio, and part of it is because my daughter's experiencing a conference herself, and I said, so what are you doing today? And she's like, well, I'm hoping to get into a breakout session because yesterday I went to 3 different ones and they were all full and I couldn't get in. And I thought, oh, well, that's a planning opportunity, as we'd say in the PR way. You got to make sure you have enough space or at least enough sessions so that the number of attendees can actually get into one. So that's a tip for event pros for sure.
Well, also just going off of that, it's also interesting because when you're planning, let's say concurrent sessions in that way, you need to see like is one topic going to be way more popular than the others, and sometimes you guess wrong. Sometimes you
Mm.
put the topic you think is going to be the most popular in the bigger breakout session, and no one shows up, and the small breakout room that you thought wasn't going to be quite as popular is packed. So it that's just sort of something I think you learn from experience, but it's also helpful, I think, to talk to attendees at the event and understand why they attended a session or why they didn't. And then, as you're building out next year's program, saying, what topics did we not cover that you wish we had, or what topic do you wish we had leaned into more? And I have seen some events that just repeat the breakouts. So, in the case of your daughter who wasn't able
Hmm.
to attend any of the sessions, if there were sessions that she had like really banked on being in, hopefully she'd be able to attend, the
Yeah.
same conversation today.
Hopefully so. I mean, she's in ninth grade. So for your first conference to the experiences, well, I could actually sit down and listen to anything. That's not the best foot forward, I think. So absolutely. I think that's really important. And there's such great event tools these days. I was at one conference and I was a speaker for a session and I could literally see that people could, I guess, register for the session or kind of indicate that they were planning to go to it. So they mark on their agenda like a favorite, right? Well, if you're an event planner for that conference, you can simply take a look at the app and say, gosh, we have over 200 people registered for this one session and only 50 over there. We better make sure that that session that's filling up has the right support there. So, in my experience, they didn't have AV support and I was in a packed room miking myself up and whatnot. And I guess someone didn't think I'd be that popular. But if you looked at the app, you would have seen that, hey, it's trending kind of hot over there. So having support across the board, across your session, don't overbook yourself on the planning side. But at least if you've got that real-time feedback, definitely we should use that. So that's another tip from my experience as well. And so, Erika, I just love that you've got that breadth of experience in this B2B space. What advice do you have for pros who may want to explore working for a trade publication or outlet in the future? I'm really fascinated by that niche because, when we started communication, some of us, many decades ago, it was all about the mass public, the mass communication tools, and very much we thought more like B2C, right? But today it's all about the niche. So, what advice would you have about exploring working for a trade pub or outlet?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there's really, it seems like there's a trade publication for every industry. So if you have a really specific product or a specific service, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to focus on that small, very engaged audience as opposed to trying to reach the masses. I mean, I think that that's part of the problem these days is people might be focused on trying to reach, the so-called premium publications and trying to reach mass audiences, but it doesn't really matter if they're not the right folks that you need to get in front of. So, I mean, I think in terms of folks who want to work for a trade publication, I think it's important to understand whether you're looking to be an expert in a particular industry and really serve that particular niche, or if you kind of like myself are just in more of a generalist, and want to just dip your toes into B2B in general. Um, I do think it's really important if you sort of want to dip your toes in. It's important to offer yourself up as a contributor and understand if that's really like where you want to focus. I personally worked with and met a lot of folks and communicators that way, specifically at PR News. I would also say, it's it's dependent upon the industry. Understanding that there's a huge range of content formats is really important. Some industries, for example, became more invested in live events post-pandemic than they had previously been because they saw that there was a lot of enthusiasm for them, while others may not have had that same opportunity. And therefore, they are maybe, either shutting down their live event business or making it smaller while they look to expand other revenue options through paid subscriptions or membership models. So I think it's important to expect the unexpected, be willing to pivot, and be open to trying your hand at a wide range of content, whether it's in-person or virtual events, webinars, branded or sponsored content, e-newsletters, etc. There's just a wide range, and I think you need to understand that you need to sort of be willing to experiment with all of them.
Yeah, those are really great tips, especially around contributing first. If you don't have your own bylines, for example, being published in the industry that you want to work for, whatever trade that is, it could be PR or marketing or advertising. It could be something totally different. You may have found, Erika, like, oh, I really like housing and I really like writing about housing. I'm just going to double down into that space. Well, they're going to want to see, have you ever created content about this before? So being willing to go that extra mile and offering that up, most times unpaid, so that you can have that experience and build that portfolio in the direction you want to go. We need to do that as practicing pros too, right? That's not just for students to embrace, it's for all of us, especially if we want to make some kind of shift or change in our careers as time goes on. So I think that's really helpful. And you mentioned how some outlets also really got into events, for example. I've noticed the business journals. Boy, those business journals across the markets, they are really good at their live events, and they are really embracing a different way to bring in revenue. But I think we also, as PR pros in particular, who are always trying to get earned coverage, I think with our business journal outlets in our markets, is we need to also move where they're moving. So for example, one creative way to get a story in the business journal is to actually pitch and nominate your subject matter experts, your leaders, whoever's relevant, to apply for their different awards that they have, their 40 under 40 or their Woman of the Year awards or their family owned business awards. Those are opportunities to get closer to the reporters who will do the write-ups on those award winners, for example. Great way to place without high payment. But then you also can look to them to collaborate with, to produce an event that you may need to hold on your own. And you have the benefit of some kind of coverage with that. So I think it's all about that nimbleness and being creative on both sides is going to be important as we evolve. Well, Erika, I have really enjoyed talking with you, and I like to ask all my guests what they think about this concept. So what does smart talk mean to you?
I think it's about, always learning, always be willing to learn, and always striving to develop new relationships. I think this looks different for everyone, depending on what industry you're in, just the type of person you are. I don't think what works for one person or one profession works for everyone. I think, I have this conversation with my husband sometimes. His roles are very different. The industries he's been in have been very different from me, and he's involved in a lot of interfacing with internal teams or existing clients. And my work, on the other hand, has involved a lot of networking and working with through external relationships. So I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I scroll through various thought leadership posts. I connect with new folks. I try to, get some virtual coffee chats. And that's just not where, for example, my husband would be. That's okay, though. I think what makes smart talk important is about navigating your career in the way that works best for you.
Yes, and having those conversations that'll help support that goal that you have there. I love that. So, Erika, this has been great. I'm sure people want to connect with you and learn more about what you're doing and what expertise you can offer them. What's the best way for listeners to connect with you now?
I mean, unfortunately, I'm on LinkedIn and email quite a bit. So, or maybe fortunately, I don't know. So either way is great. You can DM me on LinkedIn or email me. I'm just erica.s.bradbury@gmail.com. And I'm pretty responsive. I've definitely rediscovered the value and importance of networking over the last few months. And I'm really open to, grabbing that virtual coffee or, chatting through potential new opportunities.
Wonderful. We all reach out to Erika, and yes, always be networking. Well, thank you, Erika, for sharing your knowledge and your time with us today.
Thanks, Melissa. This was fun.
Thanks to our listeners for joining me for today's episode. If you like Smart Talk and strategic comms, let's collaborate. You can work with me as a trainer, a consultant, or hire my firm, MVW Communications, for strategic comms planning or PR strategy services. My book, Smart Talk, Public Relations Essentials All Pros Should Know, is available on Amazon in print or audio and offers advice, how-to tips, tools, and new PR models so aspiring and practicing pros are equipped for this evolving field. Please follow and rate this podcast if you're a fan, and follow us at MVW to get the latest on trends, trainings, and more. And as always, think smart and communicate smart. And I'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Smart Talk series. If you learned something or enjoyed our conversation, share it on social media or send to a friend. To learn more about this and other communication topics, visit mvw360.com. That's mvw360.com.